Let's dive into this history. The ash rode. The sea was not calm. It hissed and roared not from waves, but from the fire that bled into it from the shore. Carden, once a quiet fishing village tucked between rocky cliffs and olive groves, now lay in shambles, its smoke rising like a curse into the evening sky. The sun, already low, turned crimson in the haze, and the air tasted of salt, ash, and blood. Screams had faded. Only the sound of collapse remained, beams giving way, pottery shattering, wind dragging fire across rooftops as if trying to erase the place altogether. Birik stumbled over a charred beam, his legs shaking, throat raw from smoke. His fingers bled where he'd torn away burning thatch. Every breath hurt. His forge, gone. His home, cinders. The anvil that once stood like an altar had split in two, as if the gods themselves had struck it down. He moved without direction until a sound pierced through the crackling ruin. Not the moan of fire or clash of fleeing feet, but something thinner. Human. A whimper. Near the well, beneath a splintered cart, lay a boy, half covered by broken barrels and sacks of spilled grain. His eyes stared up at nothing, lips trembling. "Saron," Birik whispered. The boy didn't look at him. Not at first. Only when Birik knelt did his gaze flicker. Panic, recognition, fear. "You're all right," Birik said, though he knew it was a lie. "Come on." Saron didn't speak. He didn't move. Birik reached under the cart and pulled him free, holding him like iron pulled from flame. Not far off, a figure emerged from the smoke. She walked alone, straight-backed, knife in hand, blood on her palm. Her hair clung to her face, her tunic ripped at the side. She didn't limp. She didn't flinch. Her eyes found Birik and Saron as if she'd been looking for them. "Melta," she said, answering no question. Birik gave his name only after a pause. "Birik. This is Saron." "Doesn't matter," she replied. "They'll come back." Her voice held no doubt. Together, without speaking of it, they moved toward the docks. Or what was left of them. 3 boats had been there that morning. Now 2 were sunk, one drifting in the shallows, its sail torn, hull scorched, but afloat. They reached it just as another building gave way behind them. Birik helped Saron in first. The boy clutched the side of the boat like it might vanish. Melta climbed in next, steady hands working the ropes, the rudder, her knife now sheathed at her thigh. Birik hesitated. "I left something," he said, eyes toward the hills. Melta's hand stopped. "You're going back?" "My tools. Those won't save you. I'm not leaving them." From the bow, Saron suddenly shouted. "You're not a smith! You're a shadow! You hid when my father fought! I saw you!" Birik turned his face. He said nothing. Then he ran. Back through alleys he barely recognized. Past corpses, past cinders, to the remains of his forge. He climbed through what was left, tearing at debris with burned hands until he found the wrapped bundle beneath a charred table. Iron tools. Symbols of who he had been. He returned coughing, broken, barely standing. The boat was drifting now, Melta holding the sail steady. She didn't ask? She hadn't left. He stepped in without a word. Only then did he notice the leather satchel at her feet, finely stitched, clearly not hers. He recognized the pattern. A merchant's bag. She caught his gaze but said nothing. Her hand tightened on the rudder. They drifted into the open sea, Carden glowing behind them like a dying star. Birik sat opposite her, shoulders slumped. Saron curled at the bow, lips moving in silent prayer. The boat rocked gently. Behind them, roofs fell. Ash danced upward. And the screams had long since stopped. The world burned. But they were leaving it. And in the darkness ahead, not hope. Not yet. Just silence. The first kind that didn't hurt. The sea did not care that they were escaping. By morning, it had begun to wake, first with ripples, then with swells that slapped against the sides of the boat like a warning. Salt clung to the air like smoke, and the sun, just above the horizon, seared their eyes as if punishing them for surviving the night. Birik rode in silence, arms straining, skin split and bleeding. The salt stung the open wounds where his hands had blistered. He didn't cry out. He didn't even blink. He just pulled. Over. And over. And over. Cerrone rocked with the boat, his breath sharp and fast. His fingers gripped the side with a desperation not born of logic but of instinct, the kind that screamed louder than reason. "I don't swim," he gasped for the 5th time. "I never learned. My uncle said the sea eats what it wants. We're still above it," Birik muttered. "That can change." He was pale, shaking, already half-drenched. He fumbled through the boat's limited cargo, half a loaf of bread, 2 skins of water, a damp blanket, and a pouch of dried figs. All counted, then recounted, then again. "I had a plan," Cerrone whispered. "Not a good one, but a plan. It didn't include drowning. Or you too. Or this." At the front of the boat, Melta crouched low, one hand gripping the warp side, the other holding a piece of wet parchment. The map was smeared and limp, but her eyes were on the sky. She watched the birds, gulls, as they looped and wheeled overhead. She counted them. Suddenly, a wave hit broadside, hard. Water spilled over the edge. The boat rocked, wood groaning in protest. "Help me!" Birik barked, already scooping water with a cracked pot. Cerrone scrambled to join him. "It's filling! We're sinking! It's weather! Row!" The wind was rising. The waves grew sharper. Another crash, higher this time. A slap of water punched them sideways. Cerrone screamed and lunged toward the supplies. "We're too heavy! I'm throwing things out!" He grabbed the food sack. Melta was there before Birik could react. She shoved Cerrone back with surprising force, clutching the soaked canvas sack to her chest. "If we live through this," she said, breathless, "you'll thank me. If we don't," Cerrone wheezed, "then I'll throw you over." A gust nearly ripped the rudder from Melta's hand. Birik lost grip on the left oar. It tumbled into the churning sea and vanished. He swore and grabbed for the other, using it like a paddle, fighting the spin of the boat. Then, her voice cut through the wind. "Birds!" Melta shouted. "Look!" Birik didn't. He couldn't afford to. Cerrone did. He squinted through salt and light and rising waves. High above, the gulls had changed direction, no longer aimless. They circled tightly around something on the distant edge of the sea. "Land?" Cerrone laughed, a sound part joy, part hysteria. "She's right! There's something! Rock, maybe, something!" Birik grunted and turned the boat, following Melta's signal. They rode the storm not as sailors, but as survivors, half-guided, half-thrown by luck and stubborn hands. The sky began to pale. Waves crashed less often. And ahead, rising jagged from the sea like the bones of some sunken god, a rocky shore dark and sharp. They drifted into a cove lined with stone and shadow. It wasn't safety. But it was land. The boat scraped over gravel. They leapt, stumbled, collapsed. Breathless. Alive. Melta was the first to stand. She scanned the shore, then the cliffs. A dark gap near the rocks caught her eye. A cave. Inside, broken wooden ribs protruded from the sand. Old boat frames. A forgotten workshop. Birik joined her. Wordless, he bent down, examined the largest piece. His fingers brushed over warped boards, half-eaten by rot. He found something solid, a plank, narrow and curved. Good wood. He took it into the cave. He started to rebuild. Outside, Cerrone knelt near the water's edge, head bowed. His fingers dug in the wet sand. Something hard. Cold. A silver shape, half a pendant, broken long ago. He stared at it. Turned it over. Said nothing. The three of them huddled in the cave, cold but dry, the sea roaring behind them like a memory they couldn't yet forget. "I'm done," Cerrone muttered. "Let's go back. Better chains than this." Birik looked up, eyes tired. "I didn't pull you from fire for you to crawl back into it. I didn't ask to be saved. I wasn't saving you. Melta sat by the entrance, staring at the waves. I'm saving something else, she said. Something that hasn't happened yet. But it will. If we live. Outside, the sea finally quieted. The tide rose against stone. But the wind, for once, was still. The sea had gone quiet. After the night storm, the world felt rinsed, raw and strange in its freshness. The sun emerged from behind layered clouds, not yet warm, but brilliant. It touched the waves, turning them into silver threads, and glinted off the rocks like new steel. Birik crouched at the cave's edge, whittling the end of a plank into a crude paddle. His palms were torn, bandaged with strips of sailcloth. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if the act of shaping wood was the only thing keeping him from splintering apart. Melta stood a few paces away, tracing the island's horizon with her eyes and comparing it to the dampened map she held, now carefully flattened under smooth stones. Her lips moved silently, counting unseen distances. Cerrone wandered barefoot along the beach, trailing one hand through the shallow surf. No sign of honey, he muttered. Figures. Storm takes everything but the fish guts. No one answered. Then, something shifted. Near the mouth of the western cliff, just where the rock jutted out above the tide, Birik noticed it first. Footprints. Clear in the damp sand. Barefoot. Small. Fresh. He stood slowly. Melta, he called. She was beside him in seconds. She knelt, touched the print. There, Cerrone said. Another. Smaller. Child-sized. They followed the trail to a low crevice in the rock wall, half hidden by wild seaweed and barnacle-crusted driftwood. It wasn't just a crack in the cliff. It was a passage. The three of them exchanged glances. Cerrone hesitated. Birik didn't. He picked up the sharpest stick from their pile, a fire-hardened spear, and stepped inside. The cave was colder than the outside, but dry. The air smelled of fish oil, dried seaweed, and something faintly sweet. Smoke? No herbs. They moved carefully, the space opening slightly as they went deeper. And then they saw it. A bed of furs layered with dried palm leaves. A netted pouch with fish bones. A series of crude hooks carved from shell and thorn. A shelter. A home. And on the far wall, drawings. Made with ash, oil, and crushed shell, they showed waves. A boat in a storm. 3 figures aboard it. Birik stepped closer. 3. He turned toward Melta. Then Cerrone screamed. They whirled. A small figure stood at the back of the cave, barely lit by the dim morning light filtering in. A girl. No older than 10, with tangled dark hair, dirt-smeared cheeks, and a tattered shift. Her eyes were huge, dark, wide, watchful. She didn't speak. Didn't run. She simply looked at them, silent as stone. Birik lowered his makeshift spear. It's all right, he said. The girl tilted her head slightly, curious, not afraid. Melta stepped forward gently, slowly kneeling. We won't hurt you. The girl's hand moved to her chest and lifted a chain. A silver pendant hung from it. Half a circle. Cerrone froze. His hand went to his belt pouch. He pulled out the piece he'd found earlier. They matched. Exactly. Who is she? He whispered. She's like us, Birik said. No, Cerrone snapped. She's not. She's been here. Watching us. She hasn't said a word. For all we know, she's bait for whoever really lives here. She's a child. She's death. Enough! Melta snapped. We all bring death. She's just another soul surviving. The girl stepped forward and raised a finger, slowly, deliberately, pointing at the wall. She dragged her finger along the drawing of the boat. Then passed it. To another symbol, a rough map, carved beside the image. Her finger traced a line. North. Birik watched her. She wants us to keep going. To what? Cerrone spat. More rocks? Another storm? Someone waiting to slit our throats? Maybe, Melta said. Or maybe somewhere no one's died yet. No one spoke after that. They led her outside. She walked barefoot, unshivering, as if the cold meant nothing. As dusk fell, Cerrone paced. Later, after the others had slept, he crept toward Melta's pack. He reached for the map. But her hand was already there. "I know," she said quietly, not looking at him. "You tried before." He didn't argue. He backed away. That night, the girl lay beside Birik on the stone. He placed a careful hand on her shoulder. She didn't flinch. Outside, the sea was still. But the sky was darker than usual. And far out on the horizon, a faint glow flickered. Not lightning. Not stars. Fire. Someone else was out there. The eastern side of the island was sharper, harsher, jagged rocks like broken teeth, gulls circling overhead without a sound. The sun rose clean and cold, casting long shadows that stretched across the cracked earth like fingers. The wind came in short, sharp breaths, slicing through the morning with a quiet edge. Birik stood over the remains of a half-buried hull. It had been a boat once. The curved frame still held its shape, though weathered and sun-bleached. Scattered around it were other fragments, likely from a second vessel, ribs, boards, part of a mast. He ran his callous fingers along the splintered grain. "This," he murmured, "can float." Melta crouched beside a coil of rotting rope. She sliced off the usable length with her knife, examining its strength, weighing options. "If we lash them together," she said, "we get a deck. Maybe even shelter if it holds." "No sail," Birik replied. She nodded. The wind tugged at her braid. Nearby, Cerrone picked at a dried fig, sitting on an overturned bucket. "Or," he said between chews, "we could just wait." Birik didn't look at him. "Wait for who?" Melta asked. Cerrone shrugged. "Anyone. Raiders, traders, scavengers. Someone will find us. Someone will want us." "You mean use us?" He smiled thinly. "Same thing, if it means living." Birik lifted a broken plank. "Living like what? Baggage? Slaves? Better than corpses." Melta sighed, rose to her feet. "We don't wait." Silence fell. The girl, still without a name, sat apart from them, drawing spirals in the sand with a stick. Her drawings weren't childish. They looked almost like symbols. Patterns. She glanced up now and then but said nothing. Cerrone scowled and turned away. "No sail, no ship." Then, reluctantly, "There might be something in the cave." Birik narrowed his eyes. "In the back." "Not near her spot," Cerrone clarified. "Farther in. I saw shapes. Shrouds. Skins." They all knew what he meant. The cave's back chamber smelled of damp leather and cold rot. Lantern light flickered off rough stone, casting shadows too long to belong to the living. Birik held the torch. His jaw was clenched. They found the bodies quickly, 5 of them. Warriors once, now only outlines wrapped in tattered hides and stiff fabric. Their faces were sunken, the skin shrunken over cheekbones like masks. One wore a cape stitched from animal skin, black and well-preserved. Another had furs patched with waxed linen. Clothing. But also material. Cerrone stepped forward. "We cut the clean parts. The wind doesn't care what pushes it." Birik flinched. "This is desecration." "No," Cerrone said. "This is salvation." Melta didn't speak. She approached slowly and touched one of the garments. Then looked at the girl. She stood in the cave's mouth, watching. Unblinking. Melta knelt, whispering, "We won't take your dead. We'll borrow what they no longer need." The girl said nothing. But she didn't leave. That night, the work began. Birik cut in silence. His hands moved as they had in the forge, precise, unshaking, but his shoulders trembled. Every time he pierced the fabric, his eyes flinched, as if each stitch was a confession. Cerrone sat against the wall, scraping wax from one of the cloaks to make it more pliable. At some point he dug through a coat pocket and pulled out a carved object, a small, broken flute made of bone. He held it up to the firelight, then raised it to his lips and blew. The sound was low, wavering. It didn't sing. It cried. Melta paused. She looked at the girl, curled beside her, head in Melta's lap. The child's face was calm, but her lips moved. She whispered, gently, over and over, placing her fingertips on each dead brow. A ritual? A prayer? No one dared interrupt. By dawn, the sail was done. It wasn't beautiful. It was rough, uneven, but it held together. And when they raised it above the half-built frame, it caught the wind. A breath of air swept across the shore, soft, hesitant. The sail twitched, then stretched, then danced. It moved even when the wind paused, as if remembering what it meant to live. Birik stared at it, eyes full of things he would not say. Saron turned away, but his voice cracked. Melta placed a hand on the sail's edge. We'll call it Ashwind, she said. Built from the past. But not for it. The girl looked at her for a long time, then nodded. Outside, the sea remained silent. But something had changed. Not in the water. In them. The sea began as glass. By midday, it stretched calm and pale as hammered silver, broken only by the occasional ripple of a passing breeze. Clouds gathered, slow and high, like sails hanging in a sky with nowhere to go. The Ashwind glided with eerie grace, its black sail taut under careful hands. Birik stood at the rudder, callous fingers gripping rope. He hadn't spoken in hours. His eyes followed the shifting light, every flicker of cloud, every tug of current. He wasn't a captain, but the sea didn't know that. And maybe that was enough. Saron sat hunched near the bow, arms wrapped around himself. His eyes never left the water. You know the stories. He muttered, more to himself than anyone. Of those who vanish. Taken. Not by waves. Not by storm. By them. No one answered. Melta crouched near the mast, map outstretched on her knees. Raindrops had already torn small holes in it. Her lips moved, quiet calculations, murmured distance, cursed wind. The parchment felt thinner with every breath of rising humidity. The girl sat perfectly still in the stern. But her fingers moved, twitching, like they were counting time. The wind shifted, sharp now, salty, and wet with tension. Then came the first roll of thunder. It was distant, like a cough from something too large to name. The sky darkened, not all at once, but in sweeping smudges, the clouds now layered and alive. A wrongness settled over everything, the kind of pressure that makes you feel like the world is about to take a deep breath and scream. The sea's breath changed. Waves thickened, no longer ripples but slow, rising humps. They slapped the hull with dull, wet palms. The black sail tugged harder. The ropes creaked. We pull it in, Birik ordered. Melta moved fast, Saron slower. Together they wrestled the sail down, Birik tying it off just as the first strong gust hit, a howl that nearly tore the tiller from his hands. Then the real storm came. It didn't scream. It pressed. Wind folded in on itself. The boat groaned. Rain struck like thrown nails. Lightning licked the clouds but never touched water. And the sea rose. Bigger than the boat. Bigger than belief. They lay flat across the deck, hands outstretched, bodies like counterweights, each breath a plea to something beyond logic. Then the girl stood. Without warning. Without trembling. She stared into the horizon, into nothing. Her eyes were not hers. Melta saw it. The pupils too wide. Too dark. As if the storm stared back from behind them. The girl spoke one word. Back. Melta's skin prickled. But it was already too late. The wave rose, tall as the sky, endless, hungry. It cracked down with a force that had no name. The Ashwind tilted, twisted, and vanished. Water. Cold. Infinite. Birik sank. Salt burned his throat. Arms flailed in blackness. Wood brushed past, he grabbed it. Kicked upward. Air tore into his lungs. He surfaced, coughing. Saron! He choked. Melta! The sea answered only with foam. Then, a gasp. A hand. Saron surfaced, flailing. Blood. His glove gone. 2 fingers missing. Birik reached him. Pulled. Held. Didn't let go. Melta! He called again. Nothing. Until, a splash. She emerged, clutching a shard of wood in one hand, something else in the other. A strip of soggy parchment. What remained of the map? She didn't cry. Didn't shout. She simply floated, staring at it. Not blinking. They drifted like wreckage. 3 souls and a girl, all clinging to broken wood. The sea, having swallowed their path, slowly began to hush. It grew calm again, falsely gentle. The sky lightened, not with sun, but with absence. Dawn found them washed upon a stony shore, not the one they sought. Not one they knew. Birik woke first, retching seawater, dragging Saron beside him. The boy moaned, cradling his mangled hand, silent. His eyes stared blankly at the gray sand. Melta sat already, awake, unmoving, soaked and shaking, holding the ruined parchment like it still mattered. Her mouth was parted, but no sound came. She blinked only when the wind touched her face. The girl slept beside her. Peacefully. On the sand, her silver amulet glowed with a soft light, pulsing in time with her breath. She didn't stir, even as the tide touched her feet. They didn't speak for hours. Not because there was nothing to say, but because the storm had spoken too loudly, and its echo had not yet left them. Later, as they watched the tide recede, Birik whispered, "Where are we?" No one answered. Above them, black cliffs loomed. And far up the coast, barely visible through mist and distance, a tower. Or a ruin. Waiting. The land rose out of the sea like a memory they couldn't place. Gray sand gave way to smooth stones, and those stones to tall grasses that moved like waves in the wind. Pines swayed above them, creaking like old wooden ships, their scent mixing with salt and smoke. The sky held no sun, only a thick, pale haze that hung like breath over still water. They walked in silence. Birik limped but kept going, one hand pressed to his side where his ribs ached. His other hand wrapped a long strip of cloth, torn from his own shirt, around Saron's injured hand. The boy flinched but didn't protest. Behind them, the beach disappeared into mist. Ahead, the girl walked with sure steps, barefoot over thorns and stone, never slowing, never hesitating. Her silver amulet caught what little light there was, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Melta trailed just behind her, soaked hair tied back, eyes sharp. She said nothing, but her fingers moved constantly, brushing leaves, pressing symbols into damp bark, as if trying to translate the world by touch. Her breathing was steady, but her mind raced. Every tree, every change in the soil's color, every shape of the clouds, she tried to learn. Remember. Survive. The land felt old. Not ruined. Not abandoned. Just waiting. By midday, they reached the edge of a clearing where the forest grew thin, and the trees bowed toward a hill crowned with smoke. A small village stood there, encircled by a wooden palisade, huts round and low, with moss-covered roofs and watchful silence. Then came the figures. 4 of them, stepping lightly through the brush. Hunters, tall, with skin weathered by wind, dark eyes, and thick woven cloaks. They carried short recurved bows, arrows fletched with dark feathers, and knives of antler and bronze. The group froze. Birik stepped forward slowly, hands open. "We don't mean harm," he said, though he knew the words were useless. The hunters didn't respond. Their expressions were unreadable. Saron shifted. "I've seen this before," he whispered. "They're sizing us up. Slaves. Sacrifice. Something." Birik didn't look away from the bows. "Not this time." Then one of the hunters stepped forward. He pointed at the girl. She stared up at him, calm, silent. He reached out, touched the amulet, and everything changed. His face shifted, not with fear, but reverence. He placed his hand on his own chest and bowed. The others followed. Then they gestured, not angrily, not harshly. Simply, this way. They followed. The village received them not as enemies, but as unknowns. Suspended. A crowd formed, cautious, curious. Children peered from behind woven curtains. Dogs barked once, then fell silent. No words came. But no weapons either. A woman offered them water. Another, a scrap of smoked meat. The people of the village kept their distance, watching, never speaking, until an old man emerged from a hut near the fire pit. He moved slowly, bent-backed, but his eyes held no dimness. He looked first at the girl, then at Birik. Without a word, he placed something in Birik's hands. A bronze axe. Old. The wooden half cracked and broken, but the head still sharp. Still strong. A gift. Or a test. Birik met his eyes. And nodded. That evening, as the wind deepened and the fire pit at the village center began to glow, the villagers gathered. A ritual began, slow, steady movements through smoke and flame. They didn't chant. They didn't speak. They moved. Arms raised, hands swaying, bodies turning with the wind. Then the girl rose. She stepped from her place near the fire and moved into the circle. Her hands copied the gestures, not hesitantly, but with memory. As if she knew the dance. As if she'd done it before. No one stopped her. No one taught her. She simply moved, and was accepted. Melta watched, arms folded tight across her chest. She didn't breathe until the girl returned to her side, silent once more. Later, in the hut where they were allowed to rest, Melta found a small clay tablet. Faded. Cracked. But etched into its surface was a familiar shape, a spiral within a circle. A symbol. Her mother had worn it once, long ago, as a pendant. She whispered, more to herself than anyone. "We're not as far as I thought." Saron lay curled against the wall, awake but mute. His injured hand wrapped in fresh cloth, his eyes hollow. He hadn't spoken in hours. Something in him had dimmed. Birik sat by the fire, sharpening the axe gently, slowly. Waiting. Listening. And the girl? She sat outside the door, legs crossed, face lifted toward the stars behind the clouds. As if waiting for a voice only she could hear. The village of Lawton slept beneath mist and pine, wrapped in the hush of morning. Wooden huts leaned together like old friends, thatched roofs beaded with dew. From the ovens rose the scent of smoke and yeast, and from the low fields came the soft bleating of goats. It felt like a place untouched. Not by time, perhaps, but by the world beyond its hills. Birik stood near the east path, sleeves rolled, hands coated in resin and dust. A wagon wheel lay beside him, cracked, splintered, worn. He'd spent most of the morning shaping a new spoke from dry pine, the axe head gifted by the elder now smooth in his grip. His hands moved with calm certainty, as if they'd never forgotten how to build. Each strike echoed not like violence, but like return. Melta sat on a woven mat in the healer's hut, her knees tucked beneath her. She studied the local matron, a woman with silver braids and eyes like clouded glass, as she crushed herbs and folded poultices with movements like prayer. Melta mimicked the gestures, whispered words under her breath, testing their sounds. The village's language still slipped like water through her grasp, but she was catching patterns. Repetition. Rhythm. Saron wandered. He no longer asked questions, no longer counted days. He watched the children play and the chickens roam. He spoke little, but when he did, it was mostly to Melta. "We could stay, you know," he said one morning, watching the smoke rise from the hill tower. "They have walls. Bread. Water that doesn't smell of salt." Melta didn't answer. But her silence said enough. The girl, still nameless, ran through the fields with other children. Her laughter, once a sound none of them had heard, rang sharp and bright. Her silver amulet bounced against her chest, catching the sun. For the first time, she looked like a child. But peace never lasts untouched. It came at night, soft as the mist. Melta awoke to her name. Not shouted. Not whispered. Spoken. She sat up sharply, hand reaching for her blade. Who's there? Outside, near the gate, a figure. Cloaked. Ragged. Face covered in dust, hair wild and tangled. But his voice was clear. Melta, he said again. You wear the weight well. She stepped closer. In the firelight, his eyes held a strange calm, like someone who had seen too much, and stopped running from it. Who are you? Lamar, he answered. Once from the southern coast. Long ago. She had heard the name. A traveler who vanished during a sea crossing. One who, they said, had found something and refused to return. You're real. As real as the fire. Or the wind. He studied her face. You carry something with you. Do you know what it is? She hesitated. A child. A memory. A map I can't read. He smiled faintly. And something more. Something that draws paths to you, not the other way around. He told her of the shipbuilders to the north. Of a gulf where stars climbed like flames. Of a crossing still possible, if they left soon. Soon, he repeated. Because the world does not wait for the unsure. The next morning, Saron stood at the village gate. He handed the girl half of the silver amulet. I don't need it anymore, he said. All that I was stayed with you. Birik packed the axe. The tools. His silence. Melta lingered. The fire from the ritual still smoldered near the village center. Lamar stood beside it, holding a small stone, black, smooth, etched with a symbol of 3 curved lines. It won't show you where to go, he said, placing it in her hand. But it will remind you why you left. That night, Birik sat beside the village fire with the elders. One of them drew a shape in the dirt, a map. A path to the coast. And at its edge, a symbol Birik had seen only once, long ago. In a temple, in a dream. A spiral inside a broken circle. The girl stood alone at the edge of the village, pointing north without speaking. Her eyes were steady. Her feet already bare. Behind them, Loden slept. Ahead, the road uncurled like parchment in the wind. The forest changed as they moved north. At first, it was only the colors. The greens darker, the bark rougher, the light filtered through a mist that never quite lifted. Then the paths narrowed. What had once been wide trade routes became winding trails choked by roots and silence. Even the birds fell quiet. Birik walked ahead, his shoulders tense, cloak damp with drizzle. Thin scratches lined his face, gifts from low-hanging branches and bramble that didn't bend. He held the axe low, more staff than weapon, and his boots sank half an inch with every step into the mossy ground. Behind him, Melta moved like breath, measured, watching the trees as if they whispered a language she almost understood. She no longer looked at the broken map in her pouch. Now, she traced routes in the stars and remembered where the wind had shifted days before. Saron followed, silent. He patched his boot with string that once held his satchel. His fingers were raw, but busy. He never walked without working, tightening, sewing, fixing. He didn't speak unless spoken to, and even then only with nods. The girl, still unnamed by her own will, walked beside Melta now. Sometimes holding her hand. Sometimes humming something with no tune. And sometimes she whispered one word. Dolly. Dolly. Delu. Melta heard it clearly once. Dolly. Farther. They all heard the shift in her voice. She was no longer only following. She was remembering. Lamar brought up the rear. He spoke often, but never about nothing. His words were carved like flint, sharp and dry. This trail's too quiet, he said on the 3rd day. Even the roots have stopped growing. It rained the following night. By then, the trees had begun to lean in, their trunks split with moss and old carvings, spiral shapes, circles crossed with lines. Some were warnings, others prayers. No one could say which were which. Melta spotted the trap first. A small noose of sinew snapped. Blood on a nearby branch. Fresh, she said. Someone's still here. They camped lightly that night, no fire, no singing. Only breath. And when the moon rose, Silver behind clouds, a stone clattered through the branches and landed just outside the circle of sleeping bodies. It had a cord tied around it. A signal. A warning. By dawn, Lamar was awake before the rest. His voice was low. They know we're here. Border folk. They don't ask twice. And they didn't. Before the sun had climbed, 4 figures approached, 3 men, 1 woman. All armed. All silent. The woman wore her hair braided with silver wire and a knife tucked into the knot. Her eyes swept over them like a blade. Reason, she said. The only word in the old tongue they all understood. Melta stepped forward. We don't seek gold, she said. Only ground. And silence. A pause. Then the woman nodded. You may pass. But only one way, through the forest of no tongues. The name stirred something in Lamar. No, he said. I lost my brother in that place. I will not walk into it again. Birik didn't hesitate. I've already lost everything. I have nothing left to shout. Sarone froze. I'll stay, he muttered. Here. I'll wait for word, a sign, something. But when the time came to leave, he followed. Quiet. Jaw clenched. They entered the forest by dusk. The moment they passed beneath the arching trees, sound changed. Footsteps no longer crunched. Breaths no longer echoed. Even the creak of branches dulled, muffled, as if the air had grown too thick to carry noise. The ground was soft. Cold. Alive. The trees leaned close, their trunks bent with weight, not of time, but of memory. Somewhere ahead, Melta heard her mother's voice. Not loud. Not imagined. Just there. Now you walk your path, not mine. Birik, a few steps ahead, paused suddenly. He stared through the mist. A boy stood in the clearing. Thin. With hair like his own. Eyes too wide. Too familiar. Then the boy turned, and vanished. Not real. Just a memory that had waited. Sarone broke away at dusk. When he returned, his hands were full of acorns and moss. He smiled, faint, worn, but real. I found something, he said simply. No one asked what. The girl never let go of Melta's hand. Not once. And though none of them spoke, none of them felt alone. Talon Bay opened before them like a forgotten hymn, rough, salt-crusted, loud with hammers and gulls and curses. The air was thick with the scent of resin, fish, and pine, and the soundscape was one long, living rhythm, shouting, sawing, laughter, iron striking wood. Here, life was noise and nails. The bay was a half-moon cradle of ship bones, some vessels whole, others skeletal. Half-finished hulls towered like the ribs of sleeping giants. Nets were slung across posts to dry, ropes braided by children. Tar steamed in iron pots. The ground was black with it. Birik paused at the edge of it all. He took a breath, and something settled in his chest. This place didn't ask who he was. Only what he could do. He walked among the shipbuilders like someone remembering how to breathe. His hand brushed sawdust-covered beams, fingertips tracing curves and corners. His boots stepped over tools without hesitation. Every few steps, his fingers found something, a chisel, a mallet, a brace, and held it. He didn't ask. He simply picked it up. And began to shape. Melta moved through the bustle with her jaw set firm. She watched the traders with sharp eyes, asked quiet questions, and listened harder to the answers left unspoken. They said only one ship would sail west within the week. A rare route, dangerous waters. 3 days, they told her. 3 days or miss it. And the cost? Too much. We have no coin, she admitted. A man behind her chuckled. Then you've got no boat. Not until a shadow fell across her path. Gezer. A giant wrapped in leather, beard blackened by tar, one eye narrowed into a half-shut storm cloud. His presence pushed aside the noise around him. You want a boat? He said. His voice was like an avalanche, slow, heavy, unstoppable. She nodded. Build one, he growled and spat. You work 2 days, you get a hull. The sail's your problem. Birik was already walking toward the timber. Deal, Melta said. But Saron had vanished. He returned that night with a torn sleeve and a small leather pouch. He dropped it onto the sand between them. It jingled softly. Silver, he said. They all looked at him. No one asked? Birik didn't even stop working. You traded something, he muttered. And it'll come looking. Saron said nothing. Just walked away. We'll finish this our way, Melta said. With hands. With heat. Not with borrowed ghosts. And so they did. By day, Birik carved ribs and beams, teaching 2 village boys how to measure angle by thumb and breath. His hands moved faster with each hour. When one boy dropped a hammer, Birik caught it without looking and grunted. Wrong grip. Again. The boys listened. He laughed once, suddenly, when the younger one smeared pitch on his face. The sound surprised everyone, even him. By night, Melta and the girl worked by lantern light, stitching fiber into sailcloth. Melta's hands bled. The girl never flinched. Her fingers were precise, her silence focused. She was building, not just helping. Building as if she knew why. On the second evening, Saron stood by the dock, watching a crowd of traders and dockhands play dice. He spotted a face, one he knew. His breath caught. He turned away before they saw him. That night, he slept near the fire, back to the others. On the third morning, their boat stood on the sand. Long, narrow, built with arms sore and eyes stung by smoke. It wasn't elegant, but it was real. It had soul. Gezer stood beside Birik, chewing on a splintered stick. She's yours, he said. Not mine. Not your god's. Yours. If she sinks, it's your bones. If she floats, it's your story. Birik nodded. No thanks. Just respect. Melta climbed onto the hull, wind catching her braid. She looked west, and for the first time, her eyes did not search for landmarks. They searched for possibility. Down by the tide line, the girl drew a ship in the sand. She found a shell buried beside it, white, marked with a spiral. It matched her amulet. That night, the sea glowed under a pale moon. No songs. No speeches. Only work. Only firelight. Only the sound of wood, still drying. And stars waiting above the waves. At dawn, they left the shore behind. The cliffs of Talion Bay melted into fog, stone dissolving into nothing. No cries, no farewells. Only the creak of rope, the slap of tide, and the wind, soft, uncertain, pressing into their sail like a breath not yet exhaled. This time, they didn't flee. They chose. The boat, theirs shaped by sweat and silence, sliced into the open sea, riding low and solid, its ribs groaning with each push of current. The water shimmered like oil. No land behind. No land ahead. Just the line, that thin place where sky met sea, and the world could no longer lie. Birik took the rudder, eyes locked on nothing. The ocean rolled, slow and hypnotic, but his hands stayed firm. Each hour that passed carved something into him, not fear, not faith. Just stillness. Melta sat near the bow, her journal tied to her knee with twine, eyes on the stars even after they'd faded. She'd learned to chart without maps, to trust the angles of light and the way the wind leaned. Her voice had changed, clear, precise, the voice of someone who no longer doubted herself. Saron sat in the shade of the mast, tossing stones over the edge. If we die, he said at one point, at least it'll be in a boat that doesn't leak. Birik grunted. Melta didn't answer. The girl lay curled beneath the sail, her face turned into the canvas as if it were sky. She didn't speak during the day, but sometimes, in sleep, she whispered, sounds that brushed the edge of meaning. Once, Melta thought she heard her own name. Once, Birik heard his son's. That evening, the sea changed. The waves flattened, smoothed, until the water was no longer motion, just reflection. The boat stopped. Not fully. Not with resistance. But as if held. Suspended. No wind. No current. No movement. Time thickened. They waited, at first with patience, then with restless hands. Cerrone tried the oars. The blades dipped, but the sea resisted like syrup. He cursed, then laughed, then cursed again. "We've stopped." Eric stood at the bow, staring forward, knuckles white. "We haven't," he said. "Not yet." Melta watched the sky. "We could light something," Eric said. "Let the stars see us. Let something see us." Melta shook her head. "Someone already sees," she replied. "The question isn't if we're noticed. It's whether we're allowed." Silence fell again, deep and cold. Then, after hours of that nothing, lights appeared. Not stars. Not lanterns. Just orbs. Floating. Dozens. Small and flickering, like souls too tired to burn. They hovered just above the water's surface, drifting past the boat in silence. No reflection. No sound. The girl sat up. Her eyes were wide, but not afraid. She pointed. "They remember." No one asked who. Because they all knew. The dead. The ones who never crossed. The ones who tried. The ones who turned back. Melta closed her eyes and whispered, "Then let them watch." Cerrone sat back, face pale. He held the pouch of silver in his hand, then loosened it. One half of a broken amulet fell into his palm. He looked at it for a long moment, then threw it into the sea. "Let it find someone who still needs it," he murmured. Eric opened a small cloth bundle from his belt. Inside, a rusted iron ring. From his forge. He kissed it once, then let it slip into the water. Melta finally spoke. "My mother always dreamed of the sea," she said. "She never left our village. Never saw the horizon." She looked out at the endless blue. "I'm bringing her with me." No one answered. They didn't need to. Then a breeze. So soft it might have been imagined. Then another. The sail stirred. Canvas tightened. The wood beneath them shifted. The boat moved. Not fast, but forward. And the lights faded, drifting back into the mist behind them. They passed through. And at dawn, a line. Thin and green. On the horizon. Land. New. Unknown. Real. Eric exhaled. Melta lowered her journal, tears she wouldn't name in her eyes. Cerrone leaned back and smiled with nothing ironic in it. And the girl, she stood, faced the wind, and whispered a word no one recognized. But all of them understood it. Home. The sea fell behind them like a door gently closing. The boat touched shore with a whisper, not a crash, not a scrape, just a breath on the stones. The bow kissed the line where water met land, and the 4 passengers, damp and exhausted, sat in silence for a long moment. No one spoke. The air was different here, lighter though heavy with scent. Salt, pine, and the damp sweetness of wild grass. The beach was made of smooth stones and wind-tossed driftwood, the shore rising slowly into gentle hills shrouded in mist. Eric stepped out first. He walked slowly across the pebbles, boots crunching. Halfway up the slope he stopped. Stared out across the foreign sky. Then dropped to his knees. His head bowed. Not in prayer. Not in defeat. In stillness. Melta followed. Her boots sank slightly into the sand, the sea tugging at her heels. She had the old canvas satchel over her shoulder, now stained and worn. Her eyes flicked to every shadow in the grass, every odd movement of bird or branch, not with fear, but with care. Then she exhaled. "It's good," she said softly. "It's quiet." Cerrone came last, dragging the last pack behind him. His clothes hung loose, his beard grown thick. He didn't smile. But his eyes, finally, showed no edge. No weight. He looked around. Not a soul. He muttered. No smoke. No fire. No one to lie to. He dropped the pack. Sat down. And for a while, just breathed. The girl was last to leave the boat. She stepped into the shallows barefoot, the cold water curling around her ankles. Her small hand trailed through the wind-blown grass as she walked forward, not cautiously, but as if returning to something she didn't fully remember. Her silver amulet, dulled now, nearly colorless, lay against her chest like a secret already spoken. They didn't speak much that day. Instead, they worked. Birik gathered stones for a fire pit, placing each one with the care of someone who'd built too many things that were later broken. He didn't rush. Didn't force. Just placed. Adjusted. Paused. Melta walked the edge of the forest, noting the slope of the land, the flow of the stream, the shape of the clearing. She tore a page from her journal and began to sketch. Here, she said aloud, though no one answered. Here for shelter. There for crops. The stream, drinkable. Saron tried fishing in the shallows. The fish were too quick. Too clever. He cursed once, then laughed. Fine, he said. But we haven't died yet. That evening, they sat around a fire that hissed but held. The grass swayed like breath around them. Crickets sang, and somewhere in the hills something, deer or fox or something older, called out once, then fell silent again. They didn't talk much. The silence said enough. And then, deep in the night, Melta woke. The fire had burned low, casting soft light across the stones. The girl stood at the edge of the water. She wasn't looking out, but inward. At herself. At the place. Her hair danced in the breeze, and her feet left shallow prints in the sand. The waves had quieted. Melta didn't speak. She only watched. After a moment, the girl turned and said, almost to the wind, "We can stay here." Melta didn't cry. But something in her chest softened, something she'd locked away on the very first night the fire fell on her village. At dawn, they moved slowly. Birik built a windbreak near the trees. Melta marked spots for digging. Saron sharpened sticks into tools. They didn't call it home, but they treated it like one. Later that day, they found a stone, flat, half buried in soil, with markings carved into it. Not their language. Not one they knew. But someone had been here once, and chosen to leave a name behind. At the fire that night, Birik handed Melta a wrapped bundle. "My hammer," he said. "Yours now." She blinked. "But I'm not a smith." He smiled. "And I'm not only a smith anymore." Saron, sitting nearby, said nothing, just watched them with quiet pride. Then, the girl dug a small hole near the edge of the forest. She placed her amulet inside, the one that had guided her all this way. She covered it with dirt. Packed it with her palm. "I don't need it anymore," she whispered. And in that moment, none of them did. The wind had changed. It no longer smelled of war or burning wood. No longer carried the cries of people left behind or the salt of tears shed in silence. Now, it tasted of pine smoke, of river clay and turning leaves. It moved softly over the high grass, brushing the side of the hill like a hand that asked nothing, only stayed. The shore was still there, though the boat had long since been pulled ashore and covered with woven reeds, not to forget, but to rest. Above it, the land unfolded slowly. A stream curved through the slope like a scar-healed well. Stones ringed a garden of herbs and roots. A single tree, young but standing, reached for the sky with copper-colored leaves. The house stood beside it. Stone and timber. Walls patched with mud and love. A chimney that sighed gently into the sky. One door. One table. One fire that always waited. Inside, Birik crouched near the hearth, adjusting the iron pot suspended above glowing coals. His hammer lay beside him, not the old one, but a new one he had carved himself. The handle bore a simple inscription, etched deep with slow hands, "We made it." Outside, Anna ran barefoot through the grass, her laughter tumbling over the hill. She moved like the wind, all momentum and no fear. The silver amulet was gone, buried under the roots of a birch tree, and in its place, a voice, a name, a self. Melta sat near the wooden table in the sun, a book in her lap. Anna leaned beside her, tongue pressed to her teeth in concentration, scratching letters across the parchment with charcoal. The lines weren't even, but they were hers. "What does it say?" Melta asked. Anna grinned. My name. And boat. Melta smiled. Then next you'll ride home. Anna nodded. Tomorrow. Cerrone came from the woods with a basket of fish, 2 clay bowls in the crook of his arm. Someone left the net tangled again, he said with mock severity. Could have lost half the catch. Birik looked up from the fire, grinning. Did you? Cerrone smirked. Of course not. I'm old, not useless. He set the bowls down. I made these, he added, quieter now. Ugly little things, but they hold soup. Turns out, you can begin again. Even after 40. Or however old I am. That night, they gathered at the long table, the one they'd built together from driftwood and pine. Birik lit the lamp with a single spark. The fire danced, casting long shadows on the walls. Outside, the tree whispered softly in the wind. Melta opened her old journal, pages stained by sea and ash, by blood and salt, but still intact. She read aloud. We did not run because we feared. We ran because we believed. Cerrone lifted his bowl in mock toast. To stubborn faith. Birik nodded. To building forward. Anna said nothing. But she smiled, wide, real. Later, by the stream, she sat alone. In the mud she drew a boat again, but not the kind they'd fled in. Not sharp or rushed. This one had sails open to calm winds, and a house drawn at its center. Not escape. Memory. Not fear. Home. Back at the hut, Birik stood outside, eyes on the horizon. He no longer watched to see if someone would come to take what they had. He watched to see who might arrive needing what they could give. Melta tucked the remnants of the old map into a carved wooden box. On its lid, a new symbol, not a star, not a weapon, just a path. Etched beneath, the road we walked. And Cerrone, sitting by the fire, whispered softly, Now we plant. The wind shifted, as if listening. Not silence, but peace. And for the first time, the word home didn't feel borrowed. It felt earned. It felt spoken into the land like a promise. And somewhere, far beyond the sea, the old world turned. But here, it waited. Not for gods. Not for kings. Just for them.